Hello everyone. Today we'll explore the theory of radical social work, framing it not just as a helping profession but as a practice embedded in political and economic structures. We'll start by defining what it is, then compare it to more traditional forms of social work practice. We will also delve into two significant offshoots, feminist and anti-oppressive social work, drawing on the work of key thinkers in the field. So, what exactly is radical social work? At its heart, it's a fundamental shift in perspective. Instead of asking, what is wrong with this individual, it asks, what is wrong with society that produces this problem? It locates a client's problems within broader social and economic structures, like poverty and inequality. It's not about abandoning casework, but rather transforming it to challenge ruling class ideologies. The core idea, or twin task, is to help people see the connection between their personal difficulties and structural oppression, and to build their confidence for collective action. To understand this approach, it's helpful to look at its origins. Radical social work emerged in the UK and North America during the late 1960s and 70s, born out of a sense of disillusionment with the existing welfare state. It's important to note this is not a single school, but a loose movement uniting Marxist, feminist, and anti-racist critiques of mainstream welfare practice. It grew in tandem with powerful new social movements like women's liberation, gay liberation, and anti-racist movements. Drawing heavily from Marxist theory and thinkers like Paulo Freire, it positioned itself as a direct critique of traditional social work, which often framed poverty as an individual character flaw. So, what makes this practice radical? It's built on several core principles. First is structural analysis, which connects personal troubles to public issues of class and power. Second, it politicizes practice, acknowledging that social work is never neutral. It either supports or challenges the status quo. Third is conscientization, or raising critical consciousness so people see their situation as a result of social structures, not personal inadequacy. And finally, it emphasizes collective action, positions the worker as an ally rather than a detached expert, and demands constant reflexivity from the practitioner. This table highlights the stark contrast between radical and traditional social work. It's useful to know that the banking model reference is a term from Paulo Freire. He used it to describe a teaching style where students are seen as empty containers to be filled with knowledge. In this context, it refers to a social work model where the expert deposits solutions into a passive client. Traditional practice often attributes problems to individual defects, like personality or family issues. Radical social work, on the other hand, locates the source of problems in social inequality and structural oppression. Similarly, where traditional models see welfare institutions as benign, a radical view is more skeptical, recognizing their potential for social control. The professional relationship also shifts from an expert model to a horizontal partnership, and the primary goal moves from individual adjustment to collective social transformation. As we continue the comparison, remember that these two tables give 12 points of contrast. You might want to trim this down to the 4 to 6 points most relevant to your audience if time is short. We can see further differences here. Traditional social work views the client as a passive recipient, a case to be treated. In contrast, radical practice sees the client as an active participant, capable of collective struggle. The focus of needs also shifts, from esoteric clinical adjustments to fundamental material resources like money and housing. While the traditional approach is largely reformist and assumes the existing social order is sound, the radical view is critical, identifying systems like capitalism and patriarchy as the root causes of oppression. Within this radical framework, feminist social work offers a crucial lens. It's best presented as one strand within radical social work's broader family. It radicalizes practice around gender rather than only class. It applies feminist theory directly to practice, insisting on a gender-sensitive approach that values women's knowledge and experiences. A key move it shares with the broader radical frame is relocating the problem from the individual woman to structural power relations, specifically patriarchy. This is encapsulated in the famous idea that the personal is political, reframing private difficulties like domestic violence or carrying burdens as direct outcomes of gendered social structures. This has clear practice implications. leading to the creation of women-only spaces like refuges and consciousness-raising groups. Of course, feminist social work is not a monolith. It contains several distinct strands. Liberal feminism focuses on women's exclusion from public life and advocates for equal access within existing systems. Radical feminism identifies patriarchy, men's systematic control of women, as the root oppression and focuses on women-only services. Marxist and socialist feminism examine the intersection of patriarchy and capitalism, paying attention to women's waged and unwaged labor. Finally, Black feminism critiques other forms for often ignoring race and class, rooting its analysis in the specific experiences of women of color. It's also worth noting, as scholar Dominelli argues, that these categories often overlap in practice, and an individual feminist social worker may draw on more than one strand. Building on these ideas, we arrive at anti-oppressive social work, another key development within the radical frame. You can think of it as radical social work's evolution in the 1980s and 90s, broadening the critique of class to include multiple, intersecting oppressions. This is a value-based, reflexive approach that seeks to reduce unequal power relations across society and within the social work relationship itself. It extends the class-based critique of early radical work to a multidimensional analysis, recognizing that people can be simultaneously oppressed and oppressing along different lines like gender, race, disability, and sexuality. The goal is to create new, non-oppressive social relations, and it views the practitioner not as a neutral outsider, but as an active participant who must examine their own identity and power. Anti-oppressive practice, or AOP, is practical and organizational, not just theoretical. It asks, what do we change in policy, culture, and institutions? Not only, what do we understand? Putting it into action involves several key principles. It starts with consciousness raising at both personal and societal levels to expose what is happening structurally. Empowerment is central, focusing on helping people access resources and assert their rights. This leads to advocating for institutional and policy change to repeal unjust legislation. AOP also aims for cultural change by challenging belief systems that legitimize inequality. It acknowledges a global dimension, extending commitments to equality across borders. And finally, it demands reflexive practice, where practitioners constantly recognize their own social location and power. So how do these three strands, radical, feminist, and anti-oppressive, relate to one another? They follow a clear trajectory, from the 1970s class-based radical social work to the feminist and anti-racist critiques of the 1980s, and then to anti-oppressive practice in the 90s and 2000s as a broader synthesis. As the diagram illustrates, they share a common foundation. All three reject individual pathology explanations and locate problems in structural power relations. Their shared aim is emancipation and social change, not adjustment to an unjust system. Where they differ is their primary focus. Radical social work prioritizes class and capitalism. Feminist social work adds gender and patriarchy as a distinct, intersecting axis. And anti-oppressive social work broadens the lens further into a multidimensional model that considers the intersection of class, gender, race, disability, and more. To summarize, we can return to our opening claim. Social work practice always either supports or challenges existing power relations. There is no neutral ground. Radical social work redefines the problem from an individual failing to a structural issue rooted in capitalism, standing in stark contrast to traditional casework. Feminist social work extends this critique to include patriarchy and gender relations. Anti-oppressive practice then broadens the framework even further to address multiple, intersecting oppressions. Together, these theories position social work not as a neutral, technical activity, but as an inherently political practice aimed at social justice. Finally, for those interested in exploring these ideas further, here are the key sources that informed this presentation. These texts provide in-depth analysis of radical, feminist, and anti-oppressive social work theories and their practical applications. They represent some of the foundational and contemporary thinking in this critical field of social work.